And then you say, and do.
Can they hear me? Hello. Hello, future students.
Okay, so any reactions, questions, and this could be like scenes with part 3 and part 4. It could be taking a look at stuff that happened in part 1, part 2 that we talked about. Like, I think when we left off the last day, Kenley said, I'm not sure if I trust McMurphy. You know, we can kind of come back to that whole argument. And, I mean, obviously, to come to the conclusion, you can still say I never really trusted him or anything like that. But what struck you while reading?
I think that like it was like in the middle of this part, they were like some of the people like they didn't like trust him anymore because like they never said. But then like in the end, like after like him like choking the nurse because they were
Okay, so does McMurphy care about people, care about the patients? Does he have good intentions? The needle has moved over to the yes side for you. Okay. Do you willing to go as far as to say he is like a heroic character, or there's still so much baggage that he's bringing with him that?
yeah.
Okay. So McMurphy, not heroic, but he cares. Okay. Melissa, you had?
It's kind of related to that.
That's fine.
I wish we saw more like other sides of the nurse.
So far as like her perspective on things, more of like internal thoughts. Okay. So kind of that we got more info or information, ideas, perspectives, more things about the nurse. Do you feel bad for her? Anything in? I know.
Yeah, like you see her as just people. You don't see her as a person. I understand why he did that, but also it would be nice to see her as a human being.
So she kind of comes across more as a caricature rather than like a living, breathing human being. Okay. Caricature as opposed to human. Jess was asking what's my favorite book and all those stuff, and then he kind of started listing a whole bunch of other stuff. I read nonfiction baseball too. It's a single kind of nonfiction. Senior year, those who go into AP Lit, you'll read Beowulf, epic poem. Awesome name, Beowulf. And if you have boys in your future, name your son Beowulf. There you have it. It's a strong name. Beowulf rips arms off monsters. He's like, but there's and in Beowulf, there's a monster that he attacks named Grendel. In the 70s, there was a book published called Grendel, which is this heroic Beowulf tale told from the monster's point of view. And it's an interesting take. It's like a creative writing kind of thing. But it completely flips the perspective of a well-known story, well-known tale. And this would be kind of one interesting to do, where you take nurse's perspective on things that would be going on with it.
I have a theory about the nurse.
Theories can be fun.
I think she wanted Cheswick and Billy to kill themselves. I think she set it up so that they would.
Why? Not arguing against you. Not saying yes, you're right, but.
Well, first of all, if like Billy has a habit of like slitting his wrists and stuff, why would she put him in a room by himself with sharp things in there if like he was having like a mental breakdown? Like, why would she do that? Like, that's not a smart decision. And like both Cheswick and Billy were like really, really close to McMurphy at the time, and I feel like she wanted to like make him feel like it was his fault, so then he would get like really like angry and upset like he did, so then they could operate on him like they did.
So kind of
like a setup.
Use Billy and Cheswick as pawns in a larger scheme. Okay. Billy. Noel, we'll get to you here in a second. Okay.
I agree. I'm just like so mad because I like really think that she caused Billy like caused what happened to Billy, like 100%. And I think that she did these things to like kind of make, even though like she, like I think she was trying to make McMurphy like look bad. Like I don't know what. Like, I think she needed like I don't know why she like. I just hate her so much. Wait, I'm like
She needed leverage.
I don't know.
Why would she go so far just to get back at McMurphy though?
Because she's evil.
Okay.
She's
Like,
Satan.
why? I don't know. I also don't.
You mean so far as using like if you were going with this idea like
Yeah.
Billy and Cheswick? Okay.
There must be other like motivations behind it,
Yeah.
not just to get back at McMurphy.
She's like
trying to get back at him.
she's trying to like disable him.
I think the two knee-jerk reactions, and when you say knee-jerk, usually there's like a negative connotation that there's not a whole lot of thought to it, and I don't want to say that, but maybe immediate reactions, I guess, would be better. Is if you could take the idea, and I would say Noelle would certainly be going in this direction, and get the sense that Emma probably is too, that the nurse is kind of representative of evil. The problem with that, and not that this would necessarily be true, is does that beg the follow-up question then, does McMurphy represent good? And that can be a hard pill to swallow. I mean, Marissa's going, he does care, but to say he's a good person, there's a lot of stuff that was going on, in his life that certainly would not be good. But the fact evil would be a possibility. And then one of the big themes, or certainly, and the term motif gets used quite a bit, and we have a lot of motifs, and I think you could consider this one as well, would be the idea of power and control. Now, where you go with that can vary. If you're from Chief's mindset, where the Combine is that all-powerful, authoritative force, then Big Nurse is an extension of the Combine, and therefore she's just kind of doing what she's supposed to do. If you read it from, say you're reading it where Kesey is a male chauvinist, then that he's trying to depict females in a negative light. That would be an argument that could come up. You could argue that it is human nature to want power and control, and McMurphy kind of comes across as being a quote-unquote good guy because he's like the underdog, the outsider in the story, and he wants just as much power and control maybe as Nurse does, but he breaks to the point that, he does what he does. So I think those are probably the two initial reactions that would kind of take place. One of the things, too, is it is figurative. So, certainly, should she have done what she did with Billy, leaving him in the office? And would you go through all those mindsets or thought process of, hey, maybe you should have been here? No, that wasn't a good decision. I do think Kesey purposely has it set up that way because it kind of fits into his grander scheme of things that he ultimately does want to do, which we'll probably get into.
I think that maybe even if she didn't plan it, she was happy that it happened. Because it worked into her idea.
With Billy?
Yeah. Because it worked into her and it made her, have a reason.
I mean, I think no matter which way you look at it, Billy certainly is a victim. And you could argue that he is a victim of her. And you could even argue in some ways he's kind of a victim of McMurphy, where, McMurphy doesn't realize all the things that are going on, certainly in the patient's lives, that where if he were stuck in the same situation as Billy, he wouldn't take the same route. And McMurphy, I don't think, really reads people and personalities. It's certainly within that way. Regardless, he certainly comes across as being the innocent victim. And I think the fact that he is so childlike, certainly adds to that element.
I don't think everyone's saying that she's sort of evil and absolutely despises McMurphy. I don't think she so much despises him directly, but just sort of she does want total power over her thing. It's her sort of baby. The Lord is just
It's her domain.
Yeah, it's her thing. She wants it her way, and he messed it up, and so she wanted to sort of break him would be the right word for it.
Well, and by no means am I trying to say, therefore, that there are a whole bunch of nurse ratchets running around that
Yeah.
would want horrible things to happen to people. But whether it be ourselves or it be people that we all know someone who that they want it his or her way. And it could be something as simple as classroom teacher, could be coach, could be parent, could be siblings, where if whatever activity you're involved in, it has to be done this way, highway, otherwise shape up, ship out, and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't necessarily mean that she is out to hurt people. And I think you could also look at that she is a byproduct of, and I'm not trying to go system in the way of Combine here, but she is certainly a byproduct of the medical system where the whole psychiatric treatment, the viewpoints are very different in the 1950s and 60s as opposed to what they are now. I mean, you're taking a look at this through the 2017 lens, electric shock therapy, lobotomy. Certainly that's not the, hey, let's do that to try to fix some people kind of method that was more prevalent then. Certainly not saying that she's a depiction of the common medical viewpoint.
I agree with that. I think that, since it's from the chief's perspective, you don't get any other, you don't see what's inside the nurse's head, so you don't really know what she's thinking. And like you said, it's a byproduct of she's just doing what she wanted in med school, or wherever she went. She's not, those are common things that happen. I'm not saying they're right, but she's doing her job.
And certainly, Chief's point of view is going to be, and anyone's point of view is going to be biased. It's paranoid. And in some ways, it kind of is worst case scenario when it comes to certain things.
I would like to know, building on my last thing, so I'd like to know if she feels guilty about what she has done, or if she's completely shifts the blame onto the patient or onto the patient. Because it doesn't seem like she feels guilty, but it may not be an idea of the song.
Mm-hmm. And the ward is so different with all the people who are no longer there. Even before you have Chief's final scene and all that kind of stuff, but clearly McMurphy's not there anymore, or at least when she's there, not in the same way. And then with everyone who has left, so I don't know. I can't give you an answer.
I also don't understand her. I know Marissa said it's her job, but her motivation for some of the things that just feel I know this from Chief's perspective, but from what he thinks, that she just all these problems that she just instigates, with the book, writing the things that just all these things I don't know why that would be just there it feels like she just causes all these problems and it's
I feel like she's playing a game with the patient.
yeah, and it's really messed up. I don't understand how that could be part of her job, to just do something.
You can say something before I apologize in advance.
I'm not gonna apologize at all.
No, I was going to apologize for what I'll say later
Oh,
to
okay.
you.
Lovely. I just, was she a war nurse? Do we know that or not?
Was she
She
war nurse?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's part of the reason she is so strict and sort of evil, as you say, but because she saw the worst of things, and I don't think she wants to.
But all these people have mental disorders. Everyone in this book is going through it.
Yeah.
She probably does too.
Yeah, I'm sure. Nurses also have PTSD.
Anna, we'll go to you next then.
PTSD after traumatic events. I think it's a byproduct of the times. I don't think it's her specific.
Everybody has one.
Yeah, sorry,
I don't think it's her specific. I think it's a byproduct of the times.
I think she's true.
And I think if the idea of mental disorders being mentioned and things like that, and Emma's comment that we all could have mental disorders, or we all do have mental disorders in some shape or form. Especially in that 1950s, 1960s, to be quote unquote different meant to be something was wrong. Why aren't you like everybody else? And certainly all of us are different in some shape or form. But we're certainly, I hope we are, This seems to be the argument based on a lot of synthesis essays I've been reading, that were more accepting of those kind of differences than you certainly would have in 1950s. So I think part of the issue of the counterculture argument that Kesey is setting up is, what does it really mean to be sane versus insane? You could make an argument that Nurse is just as, if you want to say, unstable, insane as any of the other characters. Or you could argue, do the opposite side, that all the other characters are just as sane as Big Nurse or any of the ward professionals, other doctors, and things like that would be. So this is certainly a very subjective concept, and one of the big pushes of that counterculture, anti-establishment kind of argument is, yeah, folks are different. So what? That doesn't mean that you have to make them feel inadequate or social outcasts or anything like that.
I think, like, during that time, people that had, like, mental disorders were, like, the lowest of the low, because no one really understood what they were. So, I think in her eyes, like, they weren't really, like, people, and I think that's how she was able to do all these horrible things and probably not feel any guilt, because they just weren't, like, people to her. Like, if you would, like, kill a bug or something, I don't think you'd stay up at night and feel guilty about it. Like, it just, in her eyes, they were, like, not something to guilt about.
So patients not necessarily being the same as people. Yeah. Allie?
I think that they both like the idea of control and like having that power is kind of parallel to the sanity, because like the patients didn't really have control over their like mental state, and I feel like the nurse was kind of like in denial of her own mental state and kind of like trying to keep that control to like keep herself sane too.
I mean, and going with that line, like, if I don't have control over, quote unquote, these people, if you're from the Big Nurse's standpoint, then I don't really have any control over myself. Does that make me any, am I any better than them, or am I simply just the same? Now, again, I think the 2017 answer to that is who cares, but certainly, yeah, with that 1958, 1960 kind of response, you need to have some kind of control over yourself, and in this sense, if you're looking at it from the viewpoint, not that this was Anna's viewpoint, but of that depiction that if you're misunderstood, lowest of the low, if I can't control these people, then who can I control? So I was going to apologize to you in advance we kind of were mentioning last week that how do these illusions start to kind of fit in religious illusions and beyond. I think a lot of the reason why Kesey sets this up in the way that he does with the characters is it allows him to use McMurphy as a heroic character. When do you need a hero? When there's a villain. And when you have people who are essentially oppressed. So for him being Kesey, for him to elevate McMurphy to kind of like that heroic, almost martyr quality, you need someone to be a quote-unquote bad guy. And I think that's part of the reason why he depicts Nurse the way that she does. If you don't like Nurse, then you start to cheer for McMurphy in a way. Whereas I don't know how, and it varies from person to person, I don't know how many readers go, ooh, McMurphy, he seems like such a great guy, therefore the Nurse has to be the bad guy. I think it flips. I can't stand Nurse. Who's going against Nurse? McMurphy is. So now you kind of start to cheer over to his side a little bit.
I think, even though, McMurphy isn't, good, per se,
He is not.
he's depicted as, the god, and, Nurse is depicted as, the Satan, I guess, because, I marked this, before they go, they're on the boat, and they're going out fishing, and, Ellis says, be a fisher of men, that's, from the Bible, and then it says, as McMurphy led the 12 of us towards the ocean, and, the 12 disciples, and, McMurphy's, Jesus. Do you get what I'm getting at?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, I think he's trying to make him as good as possible, so that he can be, depicted in that way, but obviously he's not.
And, well,
I'm relevant to the conversation. I just sliced my finger open. Can I have a Band-Aid?
Yeah. You need one, two?
Just one. That's okay. I just was like, oh.
Mrs. Perry has cartoon characters. I just have Band-Aids. There's another just in case. Someone else say something? I'm hearing voices.
I was talking.
Okay. All right, that's good. Anything else going along that route? Because I do agree with it.
Whenever Miss Murphy was introduced to his PST, shock therapy, and some
Are you going to anoint me with crown of thorns, or anoint? I think he says, "Anointest my head with a crown of thorns." EST table, crown of thorns. What happens to McMurphy?
He gets basically
So
He's like,
I mean, you have the EST, you have the lobotomy taking place, or
then he comes
FSD,
back
I guess. But he comes back,
after 3 weeks.
and when ultimately Chief does his action and he does die, what happens to the oppressed? They leave. They're free. So he frees the oppressed. Or if you were going to take a look at, as Anna was kind of mentioning, from that 1950s, bless you, 1960s point of view, the lowest of the low. In a lot of you people's minds of the time, they've done something wrong to kind of put themselves in the position they are. So he's kind of freed them from that. What else?
Could you say like whenever everyone's like doubting him and like doubting him, when like Nurse Ratched like starts that? Could you say that that's like how like the one also like doubting him?
Thomas is the doubter,
Yeah.
and this would be after he comes back. It has to show the hands and all that kind of stuff to it. What does Billy do after he gets caught with Candy? So far as when Big Nurse starts yelling at him.
He starts with,
I mean, and like the stuttering, certainly starts to really kind of come back. Yeah, don't tell my mom, and then where does he put the blame? McMurphy made me do it, he made me do it, so he's kind of like, not anything against Billy, but he kind of becomes the traitor, and then he has the suicide, which you mentioned, kind of like a Judas kind of quality sort of taking place there. What I would say then that Kesey is certainly doing is establishing, and he's not going number one, McMurphy is God, or McMurphy is Jesus, therefore praise him. He's not doing anything like that, I wouldn't say, because he's certainly still an anti-hero. What could he be doing so far as a commentary, critique, I guess would be a good word, by setting McMurphy up in this way? And there's a few other little things that he kind of does along with it too.
I don't know, sorry, I was gonna take a second to like put my words together with this, but like, he's kind of like, even though, like, going back to like Miss Ratched, who could be like she's the person who like caused his, like, let me like think for a second, because like I know what I'm trying to say, but I don't know how to say it. Maybe come back. I need to.
Okay.
I think I get what she's getting at.
Okay, like
They all
that
came
he's
together.
not. You try.
Like she kind of like caused Billy to like fall apart, and it's like she was like corrupting Billy.
No, that like her, that Miss Ratched and McMurphy are like two opposing sides. Like how, but like Jesus was crucified because like he was going against what the church did to her and God. So like she was just trying to do what was right, what she thought was right. Like he was trying to do what he thought was right. Yeah, and like
he condemned Jesus to crucifixion.
McMurphy is not a holy person. McMurphy is not someone who should be emulated. Mr. Kane said I should be like McMurphy. McMurphy is a criminal, which just kind of add to the whole illusion thing that would be taking place, since Christ gets viewed in that way by Romans at the time. But why present McMurphy as a martyr? If you are elevating McMurphy, and generally, if you would be going, why in the world would someone be doing this? Could he really be this serious? I think more often than not, the answer is no, he's not being this serious. So he's not just maybe kind of criticizing society of the era, but what would be a good S word as to what he would be doing? If you take a criminal, if you take someone of McMurphy's stature and background and you elevate him, I think a question that you have to kind of go with, is he serious? Is he satirizing? Kesey's own kind of society that, look, in the way that we treat people, this guy of all folks is able to kind of be elevated to this heroic, savior kind of quality. I'm not saying this is definitely the one thing that he is doing, but it would certainly be something to kind of take into consideration because it's therefore a form of criticism, a form of trying to open up eyes. And if you do satirize, we're going to take a look at satire when we come back from break really in January and February, you're usually then trying to offer some kind of reform to an issue, and certainly the treatment of patients within the mental hospital, would be something that is in need of reform.
I think maybe as opposed to satirizing, which I'm sure that's probably, but also he might be trying to talk about not criminals are one-sided, patients as such.
And as you want to see more depth to nurse, there's more depth to other people we have if I can spell dimensions, multi-dimensional. We're not all just flat or static characters where there's not any kind of change taking place. And certainly a character who does go through significant change throughout the course of the book, who we haven't even really kind of gotten into, Chief. Speaking of which, based on this stuff that we have up here, about fisher of men and disciples and all that kind of stuff, Chief would certainly qualify as being a disciple. So since this is his story, it's kind of like it's like a gospel. This is the Bible of McMurphy, according to Chief. One of my favorite scenes in the whole entire book, and it's one of those little subtle details that I just kind of appreciate. What happens when Chief goes to put on the hat? So what happened to Chief? He's gotten big. Whereas before, McMurphy, that he's too big for me or something like that. He takes McMurphy's hat, puts it on, doesn't fit. He's now a bigger person before he picks up the control panel. Corey, feel free to shed a tear at any time.
I actually did cry when